northwest Wyoming, the site of a World War II Japanese-American confinement camp, for an important discussion on refugees, immigration, and Wyoming. A live conversation next on Wyoming Perspectives. Reader.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you for the opportunity of being here tonight. Well, I guess as author of House Bill 48, it really came about in November the 17th. I happened to be in Cheyenne on a Revenue Committee meeting when, of course, the attack in Paris happened. And so that afternoon I walked down to the Legislative Service Office there in Cheyenne and told them that I'd like to sponsor a bill concerning Refugee Resettlement Program and the transparency of it. And with that, I wanted it to become, as a representative, I wanted it to be where it was transparent for the Wyoming citizens. So it was treated and run through the legislature just like a bill, if you will. It would have to be introduced to the legislature. It would have to be approved by the legislature. And by doing that, it would allow for a committee to vet that out through the interim with public comments. They would hold public hearings. It would allow, and it would just open up that process, if you will. It's not right now, as it is right now, you know, we could wake up the next morning, one individual does have the power to say, you have a program.
And you're speaking of the governor?
Yes, sir. The governor can do that. There's only really two ways that a refugee resettlement program can be initiated, and that's by the governor or the legislative authority. And this bill actually names the legislature as that authority.
Good deal.
This would help vetting through the year. It would also have to go, you know, through the House of Representatives, and they have committee hearings too that the public can come to. And then it would have to go through the Senate side, and it would just give everybody the opportunity to voice their opinion. And that's, you know, that's what I hear visiting with these great panel members that we have here tonight. You know, there's just all kinds of issues out there, and especially, you know, we hear more and more, just, you know, the other day with Brussels, and we just want to be able to talk about this, see what we're getting into, you know, who takes care of them health-wise, and learning, you know, English and our language. And
we do.
This lady right here, LaDonna Zoll, this place wouldn't be here without her persistence, and it's here because she saw the last train come in, she saw the last train go out and the first train come in, and she said, we're going to tell people about that. You're now in an issue filled with emotion, fear, guilt, and racism. And if you don't think it's going to go there, the drinks are on me. So, and it'll come in from the public. Don't forget, this is a state back in '63 that had a thing in 1963 called Operation Wetback. How about that for a name? And it was real because it was the Bracero program. And those people came here legally under Bracero, and then the economy went to hell. And so they said, get them out of here. So the federal government said, we will. And we'll call it, politically incorrectly, Operation Wetback. That stream is still in there somewhere. The governor said, I don't think it's a good idea to bring him here because the Japs will be just hanging from the trees. That was 1940-something.
My God,
so,
shut up.
I got into the game. They put me on the Select Commission on Immigration and Refugee Policy. Father Ted Hesberg was the chair. It was an interesting group, Democrat and Republican, Kennedy, myself, Hamfish, Republicans and Democrats. And the toughest part of the issue is that people don't understand the difference between an immigrant and a refugee. And I don't want to sound like I'm a wizard, but an immigrant is someone who comes here who has a sponsor. And his or her income, the sponsors and assets are deemed to be that of the person seeking to come in as an immigrant. And thus there is no taxpayer responsibility. Don't forget, now when you get talking about taxes in this state, and taxpayers. I mean, you can get your underwear ripped off. So, a refugee is a person fleeing persecution based on race, religion, national origin, or membership in a political or social organization, and it means the dogs are at your heel and the guns are in their hands. This is a real refugee. There are many people who are not. And that's why only 1% or some get through. Because they'll come in, it's got to be done case by case. You can't do a blanket refugee issue. They tried it in the Soviet Union, and I remember it went through, and they didn't go to Israel. It was a Jewish population, the refuseniks, 50,000. They wanted to come to America. If you are a refugee, the minute your foot hits the land that you just are trying to, right next to the place you're trying to get free, you're home. You don't get to choose between Israel and America and London and Germany. That doesn't work. That's not the true definition. So sometimes in the Senate, in my time, and as I say, I'll be called, you can get called anything here, but the word is refugee resettlement, okay? We have had people in refugee resettlement for 20 or 30 years. The budget when I left, I think, was about $410 million. A couple of years ago it was a 1.4, and now it's 1.8. If you're resettled, you shouldn't be anymore on the federal breast. I almost got in trouble again, and I won't do it. But that's real. And then I'm an Episcopalian. The Lutherans have a thing, the Episcopalians have a thing, the Catholics have a thing, all for refugee resettlement, and they get paid for that. You don't think they're going to give that up? They will not give it up. A couple more minutes. I haven't heard Ann clear her throat yet, but I'll tell you, you can't be a refugee when you suddenly have seen your neighbor shot, the neighbor's house burned to the ground, you hate your government, and on and on and on, and you put your key in the lock of your shop and get out of the country. That's not a refugee. And today, you will find people who say, but it should be. Well, it shouldn't. It's got to be case by case. It can't be blanket. And this is what makes it tough. Because we have had people, when I chaired this committee with Ted Kennedy, he isn't exactly, opposed to this stuff. He was a great legislator. We didn't agree on stuff, but he was a tremendous legislator. We had people come as refugees. What are you fleeing from? Well, my country. Who is after your fanny? Well, what are the name of the organization? What is the place? And now we find already that into Europe, and maybe here, that in this tremendous flow are people who choose to blow up people in the softest markets and the softest targets you can ever imagine. And no wonder people are spooked. And no wonder things have soured. And that's the way it is. So we can start with some of those facts.
I'm curious, how many refugees are in Wyoming? Susan, do you have those statistics? How many are there today? Is that number growing? Where do they come from?
Sure. It's hard to define because once people come to the United States and are inside our borders, they're free to move anywhere. And so while Wyoming doesn't have a refugee resettlement program, that doesn't mean that somebody who's resettled as a refugee somewhere in Colorado can't then make the decision to move to Wyoming. And in fact, that is what is happening, is we're seeing people who were resettled as refugees in one place choosing to make Wyoming their home, whether that's because their jobs here that they want to work at, they like the communities, and they want their children to go to school in Wyoming, but people are moving to Wyoming. I don't have a number off my fingertips. I think it's in flux, but certainly there are people who are coming to Wyoming who came through the refugee resettlement program but are secondarily migrating to Wyoming. No, they're not. There are also individuals in Wyoming who live here who are then applying to the federal government for asylum status, and if they win their asylum asylum case, they also are considered a refugee. So those individuals would also be counted among the refugees who are here. But without a state program, these individuals are not getting the federal benefits that flow from their refugee designation. They spend approximately $4,797 per refugee annually. But as Bertine mentioned, there is a huge emphasis on self-sufficiency, and refugees after the initial resettlement period are encouraged to become self-sufficient to the extent possible on the from the government.
And
some people view this as a power grab from the governor.
It
to
is.
Take over perhaps what some would be his role.
It's to drain our
but you've
economy.
had discussions with Governor Meade about your bill. Can you share those with us?
Certainly, Craig, and I did. After the bill was introduced this session, and which took 2/3 vote to get it introduced on a budget session, I did call the governor's office and ask if I could have some time with him. He did send 2 escorts up for me and escorted me down to his office, and where I got to visit with him one-on-one about it, and I explained the bill to him. I said, you know, people were really concerned in the state of Wyoming when all of a sudden, you know, September 5th, 2013, you know, you write this letter to the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and it says the state of Wyoming has elected to pursue a public-private partnership model of a refugee resettlement program and to participate in that program through the Office of Refugee Resettlement. I said, that shocked a lot of people, because all of a sudden we have a program. Well, I did find out with visiting with him and through a couple of other people that it actually takes 2 requirements. The other one is to fill out this form that has 6 questions on it on how you're going to take care of them, how can they get in the workforce service, 6 different types of questions, which are all in the bill actually, because those are the minimum requirements that would need to be submitted with a resettlement program to know, you know, just those 6 important things. So the governor, after we talked about this bill and what it was going to do and the transparency of it and the vetting of it, he said, you know, he said, this really seems like a good way to handle something. And he said, it probably would take a lot of pressure off of me, and one person making that decision. And I said, yeah, it probably would. But I said, and then it would give the people of Wyoming the opportunity to voice their opinions and to ask these questions that we're getting tonight, and that a lot of, you know, that's been brought up tonight.
Bertine.
Yeah. A chance at all.
Hey, out there are real human beings, Democrat and Republican alike, who are deeply, deeply concerned about this program. And you can romance it with humanity and kindness and, you know, your heart is full. That won't get you there anymore. That's over. You got to get into the statistics, into the grubby stuff, which is, and this, Bertine is shaking his head because he worked his butt off to get here. And you can't just not like your country and decide to get in a boat and take your kid and put the kid up to peril, and they die, and then they take a photo of a tragic thing of a baby, and that's tough to handle as a human being, but that won't get you there. It's got to be case by case, and they're going to be more of it all the time, and they're going to vet them more closely, and that doesn't have anything to do with not being compassionate or caring or American. And Barbara Jordan was my mentor. She was the first black congresswoman from Texas, and she had the Jordan Commission, and she got up one day and she said, I'm tired of the phrase hyphenated Americans. I'm tired of African American phrases. I'm tired of Italian, Hispanic. We are all Americans, and we have a common heritage and a common flag and a common language, and you can go home at night and worship the great eel if you want to, and that's nobody's business. But there is a public culture, and if you come here and can't embrace that, and there are people who come here and can't embrace that, that irritates the hell out of citizens.